So here I am. Here we go. Deep sea diving. We still diving deep into the ocean of the information, data. The ocean of data, the ocean of information. We're going to go deep. I still want to, continue discussing cellular developmental biology, cell differentiation, cell determination, because there's just so much juice that we can drink from this this field of science. And I want to talk about specifically the cytoplasm. The cytoplasm is a gel-like fluid that surrounds the cell. It's the surroundings of the cell. The cytoplasm is the atmosphere in which the cell finds itself. And the cytoplasm have what's called determinants. Determinants are all the elements, components, and products and properties that actually orbits the cell. Now, the cell has a membrane. A membrane is, let's just say it's the cell membrane is a force field. Let's call it a force field. It's actually a layer, that sets a boundary or delimits the cell with the environment. It's penetrable to some things, impenetrable to others. It allows fluids that is necessary, that the cell necessitates for its growth. So it allows certain properties in, it excludes others. It removes waste, so it serves as a buffer, okay? That's the membrane. But what's interesting is the cytoplasm for you and I today would be our society, the society in which we find ourselves. There's something called cell localization or regional specification. I discussed that briefly in my last episode. Regional specification is where it's the region within the embryo that the cell finds itself, because we're still talking about embryonic development. Embryonic biology. So regional specification is interesting because, like I said, the cytoplasm for the cell is the environment in which the cell resides. So our cytoplasm is our environment, you and I. And I always come back to you and I, because like I said before in previous videos, if we can't apply the information to ourselves literally, then the information is useless. And you and I had our inceptions as gametes. I made mention of that as well. Gametes are all the cells in the body that's not somatic. Somatic cells are all the cells that are not reproductive cells. Reproductive cells are distinct from somatic cells. Somatic cells are all the cells in the body, right? Except for those cells that can reproduce. Those cells that sexually reproduce are called the gametes. All cells practice cellular division. Mitosis is somatic cells. They do mitosis, somatic cells. The gametes does meiosis, which is cellular cleavage, which is division as well, but for production of sex cells, of the gametes. So those are the distinction. Gametes and somatic cells. That's the distinction. And I always say we have to figure out and we have to understand that we're gametes. That's what we are at our inception. We're gametes. Gametes again, or the sperm and the ova, the egg, the egg, and that's how we start. Then we divide and we recombine in Mendel's, I believe it's Mendel's third law, which is called random assortment. Random assortment is the recombination of our chromosomes, right? The copies from your dad, copies from your man, from your mammy, your pappy, and it recombines and forms me and forms you. But be that as that may, if we don't understand that we are cells that has evolved and developed, we won't know how to apply the microenvironment methods and methodology. The methodology of the microenvironment we still need to practice today. It's vastly, very, very important. If you can get out anything out of this video, out of what's being said, that's imperative, that we understand that we have to get the techniques, the methodology, the practices, the principles out of the microenvironment from which we came, because we came out of the microenvironment. You and I were microorganisms that evolved into the macromolecular organisms. The macromolecular machinery made you and I, right? It is what makes all life. So to fully understand how we are to, my role, my position, my place, my regional localization as a Homo sapien sapien, right? I have to understand this. I have to understand the blueprint, right? It's that simple. It's complex, but yet simple. So the cytoplasm, again, would be the society that we find ourselves in, the environment that we find ourselves in. The determinants within the cytoplasm are the things that determine what that cell is going to be and what that cell is going to differentiate into. So if the determinants in your environment are alcohol, then that's what you're determined to become, right? Because determinants, again, are the factors, the growth factors that will determine the pathway or determine the differentiation that the cell will differentiate into. So the determinants are the things that are in your environment that are going to mold, shape, fashion, and express you as a gene. Literally, all of us. It is without exception. We are being expressed. We are being expressed daily by the determinants in our environment. You do not smoke a cigarette because you just woke up one day and said, I'm going to smoke a cigarette. No, that cigarette has been impressed into your genes. It has been impressed. It's called a positive feedback or a feedback loop. It's impressed into your DNA on a cellular micro level, and in time it expresses itself in your action, right? So it is impressed into your DNA, right, or your psyche, and then it later on manifests in the expression of your behavior and or attitude. So you thinking you like being on Facebook because you want to speak to your friends through the virtual world. No, you're not thinking that. It has been impressed upon your psyche, hence your gene, your DNA, and then it later on manifests in your addiction, which is your behavior, a pattern. It patternizes itself, and it's self-replicating, it's self-reproducing, it's self-perpetuating. I can remove the stimulant, which is the social media. I can remove the stimulant, which is the alcohol. I can remove the stimulant, which is the cigarette. I can remove the stimulant, which is sex, drugs, whatever. I can remove the stimulant and will still observe the same behavior. It's called classical conditioning. Research it. So the classical conditioning is more of the lay term. It's more of the how can I say? It's a secular term. It's classical conditioning is a spin-off of cellular development. Because classical conditioning is called classical conditioning. But if you research and dig deeper, you realize that classical conditioning is only the lipstick on the pig. It is not the pig. It's actually cellular differentiation and cellular determination. So once your cells have been determined, and here's why: your cells are constantly monitoring themselves as well as their environment, and they are picking up cues from the environment, both internally and externally. And what we don't understand about developmental biology, I spoke about the feedback loop earlier. Feedback, positive, you have both positive and negative feedback loops. When a cell picks up a cue, what does a cell do? I'll let you think about it a little bit. Cells reproduce, they replicate. So once a cell picks up a cue, it's going to do what? It picks up this cue, it replicates that cue, and it replicates that cue, and it continues to reproduce that cue. That's called a positive feedback. That's called a positive feedback loop. So the more of a product there is, the more the system creates that product. So the more there's a creation of a product, the more the system creates that product. You see the problem? Right? So this is why people get addicted to things, and this is why it's so difficult to break free from the addiction, because your cells are replicating. They're feeding back to you what they're picking up from their environment. So the takeaway from this, again, I kind of diverged a little bit, but kind of went off course. Well, I didn't really go off course, but I strayed from the word cytoplasm. The takeaway from this is you are a cell. Okay, you're a cell, right? You are in a cytoplasm, which is your environment. It's called also an extracellular matrix. And you, whether you're sleeping, whether you're awake, whether you're conscious, subconscious, you are interacting with your environment. You're interacting with the television. You're interacting with the internet. You're interacting with the cell phone. You're interacting with your fellow man. It's your ecosystem. It's your ecosystem. So you're not only interacting with it on a conscious level, but your body, your 2 trillion cells that you're made of are interacting and communicating with your environment nonstop. You can't prevent this. This is inescapable. This is a fundamental law of our universe. This is us. What you can do is be mindful. That's the like. People ask me, well, knowing all of this, well, I mean, you can't, it is what it is, right? No, yes and no. Yes, because again, I'm not naive. If you're in a pool, you're going to get wet, right? There's no way to be in the pool and not get wet. There's no way to be in the ocean and not get wet. It's just, it's physics. It's the laws of nature. You don't jump into water and stay dry. You have to get wet. So I get it. You can't be in this world and not be affected. Here's what you can do. You can be in the pool, get wet, but don't fucking drown. Right? That's the thing. Like, you can be in the pool, you can deep sea dive in the water, but not drown. And that's the problem. So many of us are drowning. Right? You look at society today, people are drowning. Like, we're just having, like, people are killing people left and right. You know what I'm saying? Like, you just, like, people are just nuts out in this world. Nuts, completely nuts. And I believe that what's contributing to that, the drowning, not the getting wet, because we're all going to get wet. We're in the water. We have to. What's contributing to the drowning is not being aware that you're in the ocean. That's why consciousness is so powerful. Awareness, consciousness. Having your neocortex fully sharpened, the neocortex, right? Very front part of the brain. It's called the neocortex. It's the executive part of the brain. You have the amygdala, hindbrain, reptilian brain. You have, there's different parts of the brain, so many different parts, but the neocortex, you have the frontal lobe, prefrontal lobe, but the neocortex is the actual executive, parts of the brain. And having that consciousness and that awareness that you're in the pool or that you're in the ocean, it increases your odds of not drowning. Your survivability or your viability stock just appreciated by 100%.